I am recording. No problem, Prince. Okay, so if you are going to set up Flair, you need an instance of Windows. And because we're using this in a virtualized environment, we're going to use a VM instance of Flair in our environment. For setting up purposes, we're going to use our host environment and we're going to use VirtualBox. It's a little easier to do the networking in that environment. But at the end of the day, when we roll this into actually our toolkit, it's not going to be in VirtualBox. As I said, it's going to be in Microsoft's Hyper-V, Hypervisor Virtualization Management Tool. At the end of the day, when you go to azureforeducation.microsoft.com, it'll take you to this page, and then you can log in. Okay, I'm logged in. Once you're logged in, you should see this page here. Okay. When you log in the upper right corner of the page, there is a link for a portal. You click on that, and then that takes you to your Azure portal, which gives you a lot of resources. Your resources may not be the exact same as mine, but you should have a list of resources. I have an instructor or teacher view into Azure for Education. You will have a student view. You will not see the exact same things I have, but you should have a link for education. When you click on that, it takes you to the place where you can start playing with some of the educational resources, one of which is the ability to download software. Should be along the left side, and I've created a web page in Learn for setting up FlareVM with the link and screen caps of these various things. And once you're here, then it's just simply a case of looking for Windows. Okay, you can scroll down to the bottom of your list because it is stored alphabetically. But what you want to download is one of the instances of Windows 10 Consumer Edition. And I recommend 1903. That's fine. You can really install any one that you want, but you want to find Windows 10 Consumer Editions, one of them. Okay. Not Windows 10 Development Kit, not Windows 10 Hardware Lab Kit, not these things. You actually want a Consumer Edition of Windows 10. I recommend version 1903. They should all be fine, but 1903 is probably the safest to grab. Okay? Actually, why don't I screen cap that right now? Okay, so actually, I'll add that to the information. Once you have it downloaded, and you can do this on your own, you can then set up an instance of Windows in your virtual environment, and it's very straightforward, but there are some very key things that I need you to do. Very key things for this to work. I don't know how closely you follow along with the tech news. I've told you many times that you need to get into the habit of listening to the technology news that happens in the real world. I hope you take my advice. One of the things that happened recently with Windows is they disabled the ability to disable antivirus software. There's no turning it off now in the newer versions of Windows, which dramatically impacts our ability to set up an instance of Windows for performing these malware tests. It's actually a pain. It's one of the reasons why it's taking me so long to come up with an alternative to what I was going to do in VirtualBox, because everything else I tried in Azure updated Windows and enabled the antivirus software, so we had to really work hard to come up with a workaround just to get Windows to work with Azure in the way that I wanted it to, because Microsoft is doing what Microsoft always does. It thinks that its users are too stupid to do what they need to do. And right or wrong, that's what's going on. They are belittling our ability to take care of ourselves, even as IT professionals. So we've had to come up with a workaround. This is what I have working so far. Now that I've downloaded my OVA file, I can create a new virtual machine. And it's very simple as we used to. Instead of saying Ubuntu, what we're saying is Windows. And when it says, when you type in Windows, it says, oh, you want Windows 7. Actually, I don't. I want Windows 10 64-bit. Okay, and you should probably change that to FlareVM, because that's what the VM is going to be called. You can put it in any group that you want. I'm going to call it FlareVM. It's Microsoft Windows, and it's a 64-bit instance of Windows 10. Please download the 64-bit version. Next, I would give it at least 8 gig if you can. All right, if you can give it 16 gig, that's going to be a little bit better. But 8 gig works. 8192. Click on Next. We're going to create a virtual disk. A VDI is fine. Dynamically allocated is fine. 50 gigabytes is very important. At the end of this installation, it's going to be about 10 gig in size. Once we set up Flair, it's going to be about 25 gig in size. So you want to give yourself lots of room, not only in your settings, but on your hard drive as well. I've got 47.6 gigabytes of free space on the drive I'm setting up. That will be enough. I need at least 25 gig of free space where I'm setting up Windows. If you don't have it, use a secondary drive. Okay, so 50 gig is fine. As always, we want to go in and tweak the settings before we start. General is fine. System, if you can give it a second processor, give it a second processor. Because it's Windows, it's already upped the video memory to 128, so that should be fine. Storage, you want to, for the CD-ROM, you want to specify the DVD that you downloaded. You say choose a disk file, go to wherever your downloads are, and select that Windows 10 Consumer Edition 64-bit. I've also got 32-bit. Don't use that, use the 64-bit. Okay. Audio is fine. Network, as always, we're going to have 2 adapters. One on our host-only network. You should only have one host-only network name, and promiscuous mode, allow all. What is very important for this, we have 2 adapters, and we unplug the cable for both. Everything else should be fine. Again, how did I do that? After I created my virtual machine for Windows, I gave myself 8 gig and a 50 gig hard drive. I go into my settings, I go to my system, I'll give myself a second processor. If you can, give yourself a little bit more memory, like 12 gig or 16 gig. 8 gig is lots. The display should be fine. Because we said Windows, it gave us 128 megabytes of video memory. That's great. Go to storage, select the CD-ROM, and choose the location and the name of the file that you specified. The Windows 10 Consumer Edition 1903 x64. Audio should be fine. Network is very, very important. As always, 2 adapters, one on our NAT, one on our host only. For our host only, we set promiscuous mode to allow all, and the big variation for now is we unplug the cable for both. The reason is pretty straightforward. After you set up Windows, it right away tries to do an update, and one of the first things it does is it installs an update that makes it impossible for us to disable Defender going forward. So right away, before we even install, we have to make sure that this virtual machine is not connected to the internet. This is overkill. Unplugging both cables is overkill, but I want you to understand your environment and understand we're doing it for a reason. Any questions on that? I don't expect you to be with me. I just expect you to follow along and ask any questions you may have. Does anybody have a question? Let's move on. Now that I have my settings in place, I can simply start my VM and begin the install. Let's see if I can show you this. It always wants to verify for me. I don't know if it does this for you, but I always have to go through and say, actually no, select the Windows install CD, and then click on start, and then I get something like this. I don't know if you guys see that, but I see that all the time. It's getting a little frustrating. I should probably update my VirtualBox version, but it's not broken other than that, so I'm reluctant to change any settings. Again, are there any questions? Windows will start up right away. The defaults are fine. We're not using this as a client machine. If you really want to, you can change the date and time to Canada. It doesn't matter. Click on Next. You then tell it to install right away. Okay? It will ask for a privacy key, for a product key. That is part of the information you can get when you download it. Like if you say version 1903, you can select the view key and you can take that key and type it in here. You don't have to. You can say I don't have a product key. It won't be happy, but it'll let you continue. I would say Windows 10 Pro or Windows 10 Education. I'll select Windows 10 Education because this is an educational activity. I recommend you do the same. Windows 10 Education. I accept the terms. And on this screen, you want to do a custom install. It only has one place. We click on Next, and then it'll go through and it'll start the installation for us. Okay? Any questions? So you can bypass the key by saying, I don't have a key. You will have to select a version of Windows. If you type in the key, it will know the version based on the product key you type in. Everybody's product key is going to be a little bit different. Okay? Once you've done that, you don't want to do an upgrade. You want to do a fresh install of Windows 10, which is the second option. And then it'll find where it's going to install it. There's really only one place, and that's that 50 gig hard drive we defined when we set up the virtual machine. And it'll go out and it'll start copying the files. Okay? We will come back to that in a second. I'm going to shut down Remnex because I have too much going on. Alrighty. At the end of it, it will restart Windows. You may have to go in and unplug the optical drive, but I'll show you that in a sec. While this is running, we're going to take a look at Windows once it's up and running. Obviously, I set up a version earlier. Please note, for this virtual machine, I am still not connected to the internet. When you take a look at the Flair setup, which is the VM I just started, and we look at the network settings, both of my cables are unplugged. Okay? And that is done on purpose. Okay? Restart now. You should probably kick out the CD-ROM. If it doesn't, if it still has a CD-ROM, it says it wants to boot from the CD. Just, you know what? Remove the disk from the virtual drive. Just eject the CD. Microsoft didn't do it, and you don't need it after that bit. Okay? As part of the setup on this screen, you need to set up a username and a password. I recommend that the username you set up is Flair and the password is password. Because when you run the script, you are going to have to type in a username and well, it's going to know the username. You're going to have to type in a password to run the script to populate this machine with the FlareVM stack of tools, the toolkit, if you will. Okay? Before you can do that, and again, seeing that I have no network connections, all right? There is no networks, there's nothing going on. I still have no network connectivity for my instance of Windows, okay? And that is very, very important. The next thing we're going to do is disable a couple of features. I will include the links for you Yeah, I've added that. Oh, and I also realized that there was a couple of modules not visible for your section. I apologize for that. They're visible now. There's two things we need to do: permanently disable Defender, and we also have to permanently disable updates in Windows. There's a couple of good articles in Windows Central. There's 3 different ways of disabling updates. I found the most reliable to be the Group Policy Editor, and that's what we're going to use first. We're going to disable updates in Windows, and this is done by the following: hitting the Start key and typing in gpedit.msc. gpedit.msc will open up the Group Policy Editor, and it's a Microsoft snap-in, or a Microsoft console snap-in, I should say. This tool is called Microsoft Console, and it runs with different snap-ins. You've probably seen this with Jeff and his class. Okay? And what you want to go is to Computer Configuration, and under Computer Configurations you want to go to Administrative Templates, and under Administrative Templates we want to go to Windows Components. And if you think I had this memorized, you are out of your mind. Once I go to Windows Components, I select Windows Update, and there are a bunch of options here. One of them is Configure Automatic Updates. And it's quite close. It's in the top third, I guess, but it's one option here is to configure automatic updates. And it's not configured, which means it goes by the default. Double click on that and set the configure automatic updates to disabled. Okay? So again, how did I get here? I hit the Start button and typed in gpedit.msc. gpedit is the Group Policy Editor for the Microsoft console tool that is available. It's a snap-in to the Microsoft console. And we're going to Computer Configuration, Administrative Templates, Windows Components, yes, Windows Updates, Windows Update, and then Configure Automatic Updates. We select this option and we set it to disabled. And then click on OK so that it shows that it has been set to disabled. Okay? That should turn off the policy. At this point, in theory, it should not do updates anymore. So that's the first setting we want to do. The second setting we want to do is to permanently disable Microsoft Defender. And one of those is to use Windows Defender itself to do it. So I'm going to close this down. There's a way of doing it in the Group Policy Editor as well. And I was trying to do that, but it doesn't seem to work. So we're just going to go in and we're going to search for Defender. It'll give us Windows Security. You can maximize virus and threat protection. Select Settings. Turn everything off. Real-time protection. Cloud protection. Automatic sample submissions. Tamper protection. Turn everything off. Turn all of your systems off. Right now, when you go to the home page, it says, hey, everything's turned off. Are you sure you want to do this? The answer is yes. Again, how did I get here? Start menu, Defender. One of the options is to go to Windows Security. Once you're here, go to Virus and Threat Protection. Select everything and turn it off. Do not do updates. Don't do anything. Turn everything off. You can manage settings, real-time off, cloud delivered protection off, automatic submission off, tamper protection off. You can do some folders and some exclusions and what have you, but by and large, we're going to just turn everything off. An interesting thought I just had, maybe you can add an exclusion for the entirety of your C drive. Yeah, that's I don't know if that would work or not, but I'm going to select C drive, and say exclude everything on C drive. Maybe that'll help, I don't know. Okay? So those are the configurations we made before doing anything else. We disabled updates and we disabled antivirus. Okay? Before you get there, however, you have to go through and do some final settings in Windows, and I'll just quickly walk through those. Select a region, doesn't matter. You can select Canada if you want, but again, it doesn't matter. Keyboard default is fine. Do you want to add another keyboard? No, skip that. It's then going to say, hey, do you want to install or enable a bunch of stuff? It's saying, hey, you need to enable a network. Say, I don't have a network. Okay? It's saying, you get more when you connect to the internet. And I said, I don't have an internet. You're going to give it a name, and this is what I was saying earlier. I suggest the name Flair, F-L-A-R-E, as a username, and then for the password, you of course can do whatever you want. Okay, it's going to insist on 3 questions, and it is so annoying. So I just go, what's your pet's name? And my pet's name is Flair. Next. Security question 2. What's the name of the town where you were born? Flair. Next. Security question 3. What's your childhood's nickname? Flair. I don't care. You can type in whatever you want, but by typing in Flair, 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 it makes it easier for you to manage it in the future. Okay? Do more with access devices? No. Digital assistant? Decline. Online speech? No. 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 Say no, 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 no with everything, because it's going to complain because you don't have a network connection. And then it goes through its silly little Windows hello, which is just silly. And so I don't know when Microsoft stopped pretending to be a professional organization, but this is one thing. Getting a little crazy, Himanshu? Did you have? No? No? Okay. All right. There, we are recording this. There's actually 2 recordings going on. Okay, fair enough. So it does do the Windows update at this point. Okay, and I'm just going to let it finish this. My hard drive is fast enough that it should finish it quickly enough. Okay, and then it presents you with Windows, and that's very similar to what we saw earlier. I'm just going to power that off, and then the next time you log in, it should work fine. Okay? This is the one where I did my policy editor settings. Okay? And that should be fine. Just 1 second, please. I need to bring up something because I always forget the exact phrase for that policy editor setting. Okay, there it is. All right. So now that I have what I think is Windows set up properly, it's of course going to complain. It's going to say turn on your protection, search for a display driver because it wants to do an update. I don't think we should do that. I think we're fine as it is. I am loath to enable a connection to the internet at this point, even though I could, even though I probably, I'm going to, even though I could safely, I'm loath to do it because I don't trust Microsoft at the end of the day. But now what we need to do is we actually need to run a script that will connect to the internet and download and install all the files for us. Okay? Before we do that, we need to go in and download our, well, let's just download our script first. Okay? If I launch Windows and I try to go to google.ca, of course it's going to complain because, of course, I don't have internet connectivity. One of the things that should happen when you go to your network adapters and plug in your cables and click on OK is that it should give you internet connectivity. You might need to restart Windows. Shouldn't have to though. Interesting. Okay. So we're going to restart Windows. That's worrisome. I thought I connected those cables. Oh, I did the wrong one. Haha. That shouldn't be your problem, that's just my problem. I selected the wrong VM and plugged in the cables. I plugged in the cables on a machine that wasn't running. This will probably work quite a bit better. Select the right machine and plug in the cables and click on OK, and right away you should start seeing some connectivity. And my password is, of course, password. And right away we see internet traffic. And right away I'm worried because right away Microsoft is going to start installing updates. So we're going to have to move pretty quickly. See, right away it wants to log me into OneDrive. Gotta love Microsoft. Anyway, the first thing you want to do is go to Google. And the first thing you want to search for is FlareVM GitHub. FlareVM GitHub. And I explained this in the PowerPoint slide. There's a FireEye FlareVM GitHub repository. When you click on that, there's a single file here called install.ps1. When I select that, I can right-click on the raw link and I can save target as, and I just want to save it somewhere in my environment. I recommend you create a directory off the root of your file, off the root of your hard drive. I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it Flair. I'm going to go into Flair and I'm going to save my install.ps1 PowerShell script there. Okay? Did you see that it ran a virus scan? It's not supposed to do that. But there we are. When I open the folder, I see I have my PowerShell sitting in the Flair directory. That's great. I'm going to now close down Windows. I'm going to close down Microsoft Edge. Close all tabs. Close all tabs. Perfect. Okay. Now that I have that done, I need to launch PowerShell. But I need to launch PowerShell as administrator. So again, how did I get here? Start menu, type in PowerShell, select PowerShell, not x86, but the regular PowerShell, and run as administrator, and say yes. Okay? We are going to run this PowerShell, cd://Flair, dir, and then we have the install.ps1 file. Before we can do that, we have to set the execution policy to allow an unrestricted execution policy. Tab is your friend. All right. Set -ex tab execution policy space -exe execution policy space untab undefined, no, unrestricted. Tab until you get the results you're looking for. Set execution policy -execution policy unrestricted. Okay, and at this point Yes to all. A. And enter. Now you have a policy that allows you to run the script. At this point, it's dot backslash and then install.ps1. It says, do you want to allow this script to run? You can just say R to run, and it'll start the script process. The reason why we set a simple username password at the beginning is for this reason here. It's now asking us for a password. The password for Flair is password, or whatever you set up when you set up that first account. And then that's it. A couple hours later, you will have Flair installed in your environment. You may have to run this script a couple of times. Okay? You may have to restart a couple of times, but I would like you to try and get this up and running. This is one, as we saw in our last class, this is one of the more important toolkits that I cover in the malware class. Is it the only one? Of course not. Don't let the red freak you out. It will throw red from time to time. Sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's not. Let it do its thing. It'll take a couple of hours, so make sure you have time to do the work. Okay? Are there any questions? Alrighty. I'm going to stop this.